All right, welcome to our free class on parenting kids with anxiety. We are so glad that you are here. I am Samantha Moe, certified parenting coach. I will introduce my other co-hosts here today momentarily, but I want to start with the idea of why you might be here. Now, I am the mom of an almost 5-year-old, and when I was thinking about anxiety and those everyday moments, I was thinking about 2 days ago when my son was in full meltdown mode before breakfast because his beloved auntie was visiting from New Orleans and he wanted to stay home from his summer program to be with her. So, we're sitting at the kitchen stool, and through his tears, he was saying, "Can we fix it? Can we not go to my summer program? Can we go back to the beginning of June where I didn't have to be gone all day?" And if you're here as a parent, you know the things that run through your mind. I was thinking about, no, obviously we can't rewind time. I was wondering, like, should I be sarcastic and like bring that up? No, not when he's 5 years old. I wanted to justify and let him know that no, if you stayed home while I'm working, you're going to be really bored. And then I also wanted to like hurry his feelings along, right? He was really anxious about missing out on time with his auntie that day. And I was thinking, we've got 10 minutes to get your shoes on and out the door, and you haven't even eaten your oatmeal yet. Underneath all of that, I also felt guilty. I felt guilty personally because since he was born, I've actually only worked 3 days a week in the summertime. Being in the Midwest here, I like to take advantage of that. And I also felt guilty that I was rushed and having a hard time pausing and just being present in that hard moment. Now, you might have felt this way. You might have felt it even more significantly given what you're experiencing with your family. And if you feel like you walk that tightrope between logic, teaching your kid, trying to move situations forward, and like their emotions, like trying to be present for them, while of course navigating your relationship, being connected to them, having to possibly work, and like what is right in this moment, I want you to know that we're going to be talking about these things today. How do we navigate these big emotions when they're running high? We're making it really practical for you as parents and caregivers. And we also know we have a lot of helpers on the call. So if you work with children, if you're a teacher or a superintendent or some sort of mental health professional, feel free to type that in the chat box. But also, what we're curious about is truly why you are here today. So feel free to type. Is there something that's challenging for you that attracted you to this conversation today? Do you have a hope, a goal? Maybe it's summertime related. Do you have a question? Are you looking for something that you haven't quite found the answers to? I feel like a lot of us do. We're all the three of your hosts here, we're parents. And so we know what it's like to read books and listen to podcasts and scroll on social media and get all of these ideas. But then sometimes we don't actually get the long-term answer to the question that's really plaguing us. And you'll hear more about that as we go along here today. So checking in on why you're here. I see, all right, Janet, K1 teacher, neurodiverse children with anxiety disorder. Thank you for sharing. The current news troubling your anxious child, so you want support in education. All right, fiery 4-year-old. I see it, Shonda, and children's mental health. So sometimes when you're wearing both of those hats, you have the child and you're working in the field, it can be really vulnerable to come to a space like this and say, I use all my skills at work. What happens when I'm actually with my kid at home? All right, so early Head Start. Thank you for being here. Middle schooler. I got you, Kim. Great. And then thank you. Everyone's family circumstances are different. So love to see how kids entered your family. So adoption, we've got some exposure to things like fetal alcohol. Got it. So, and then we kind of get into the common challenges when we have a child with anxiety at home. We've got things that I see here like meltdowns, hard to calm them down. Even when your child becomes an adult, so they're your adult child, how do you improve that relationship with them in those years? And grandparents in the house, I appreciate that. Missing school, things like that. All right. So if what I'm saying makes you feel like you are in the right place, like some of those symptoms or some of those signals of behavior are happening to you. Let me share with you what we're going to talk about today and then do introductions. All right. So, we want to make sure that what you learn here today is, well, first of all, actually, we want to acknowledge that parenting kids who are anxious is a deeply emotional process and oftentimes deeply lonely. You're in the situation, and so you have to navigate it. And sometimes it feels like there might be resources for our kids, but not necessarily for us. And the emotional weight that we carry doesn't always get talked about. So we're going to talk about that here. And then many of us feel like we're doing a lot of things, and yet we're still not seeing change that makes a difference where there's actually more relief and ease at home. So, to introduce who all of us are, if you haven't come across me before, I'm Samantha Moe and a certified parenting coach, creator of Mad to Glad Blueprint, which is an international parenting program rooted in brain science to teach you practical tools to create calm and connection with kids who are particularly emotionally intense. So, big feelings, big behaviors. I've been doing it for 21 years. We have Jason here. Jason, maybe say hello so that you pop up on speaker mode just briefly.
Hello, everyone.
Okay, great. People can see you now in the sea of people who are on this call here. So, with Jason, he is a tech innovator and a dad of a daughter with anxiety and ADHD. Him and I are co-founders of a new business called Togetherly. We'll talk more about that platform down the road here. But part of his journey was being on a wait list for his daughter with anxiety for 6 months, like a therapy wait list. And when he asked about what things can be done at home, they said to him, you know, we don't have the time or actually the training to help with the things that are happening at home and guide you there. So his us being co-founders of Togetherly is born from his mission to make sure parents have the tools and the communities that they deserve. And then we also have Kathy. Please say hello here.
Hello, everybody.
All right, Kathy Flaminio. If you are anywhere in the Twin Cities, you probably know about her and her Move Mindfully program that is in lots of schools and hospitals and what am I thinking of? Detention,
Service- Yeah, service,
juvenile. Say that again.
juvenile services.
Juvenile services. Thank you very much. So, Kathy is known for her trauma responsive mind body practices to be used in educational, home, and therapeutic settings to support mental health and well being for kids, youth, and adults. And now I know that you've trained over 75,000 professionals in your practical tools for self-regulation that people can use right away without special equipment. So you are all in good hands here with us today. So Jason, I'm going to kick off with you briefly here. I
Hmm.
know that your journey as a dad is part of what sparked this entire conversation that we're having here today. We had some Facebook posts and some social media posts about this topic of parenting kids with anxiety. And I think you said it had more than like 6,000 clicks, which tells us how important this topic is. So, as a dad, why don't you share more about what brought you here and why you care about this conversation?
Yeah, thanks, Samantha. It's great to be here with everyone. I'd say two main things. One, Samantha, you alluded to a little bit. You know, I've been on this journey of parenting my 12-year-old daughter who has pretty bad anxiety. I'd say crippling anxiety at times, panic. Over the last 6 years, it's really gotten, I'd say, worse. And I still feel not equipped, not fully educated, and not like ready to parent and love her well with where she is as I've tried to navigate that alone. And when I've gone for help outside of just kind of internet searches, I'm generally focused on getting Georgia therapy, my daughter. When asking them lifestyle questions, they basically say, "Hey, I'm not trained in that, and I don't have time for that. I'm your daughter's therapist," which I totally understand. I want my daughter to be served, but the reality is, majority of my daughter's time is at home with me, her siblings, her mom, etc. And we need to be better equipped to support her at home. That's where the majority of her life is living. So has felt like there's been a major gap for myself. And then the second piece is I was chief product officer at a company called Kiddo Health, which was all about building technology, wearable technology to put on kids to better understand physiological issues such as stress, sleep, and others, and how that relates to their mental health. And what I kept running into in serving thousands of parents using technology is the two main comments they said is, I feel alone and I don't feel like I have resources locally that really help me my journey. And the fact that I kept hitting that pain point with parents out there just felt like there's a bigger need than just myself. And so those are the two main areas of why I'm here today to speak both from that experience as well as my own personal experience as a dad.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Jason. Really glad to hear that. And Kathy, how about you? What brought you here to support the mission of Togetherly and interest you with this topic?
Well, I've worked with Samantha, so we've worked together and it's been amazing. And when she talked about what you two were doing, I was just all on board because as people know, if you know my work, I worked in Minneapolis public schools for 20 years as a social worker, doing what I call chin up interventions, talking, problem solving. And when I had kids, doing the same thing when we know that stress and trauma is in our nervous system and how important it is to work with the mind body connection. And so I really felt like when you two were talking, I was like, first of all, we can't do this alone. We aren't made to do this alone as parents, right? And secondly, there are things to do so we get to be well in the process. Just like when we brought these, mind body practices to the schools and to the educators, we saw changes in the children, but where we got really excited were the changes in the adults. So I feel like we're on a mission right now that we need to be together on this. There's so much wisdom and there are tools out there, but we need to do them together. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you so much. So, all of us see this piece that is missing for our kids, for ourselves as leaders in our families. And what we want to do is we want, from mine and Kathy's, I've got 21 years of experience, Kathy. How many years do you have professionally?
I've been in the schools since 1998, and my business started when we really were honing in the mind body practices in 2009. So a long
And
time.
and parenting, your kids are how old?
Parenting 24 and, going to be 22. So
Uh-huh, great. Thank you so much. So what we know is essential from the work that Kathy and I have done is we want to make sure that you understand where behaviors and anxiety is coming from. So we're going to talk about the brain in a little bit here so that you can understand why is anxiety taking over. And then we're going to kind of weave throughout here why some of the well-meaning advice that seems like it should work doesn't. If any of you have ever said, like, all right, just calm down, just take some deep breaths, you know what happens next, right? Like I know in my family situation what happens, and so you know in your family situation what happens. And then you're for sure going to walk away with some practical tools that are science backed so that you feel like you have a sense of like, okay, how do we create more calm and connection and feel confident in it? And then if you feel like you want to take this deeper and you're like, I like these tools, I heard they've got a course coming up here, we'll talk about that too. So, Kathy, let's talk about what's really happening with anxiety and why anxious kids can't calm down. Do you want to take the lead on that?
sure. Well, as we all know, we teach what we need to learn. So a lot of this comes firsthand from my own experience with anxiety and ADHD, right? And what really is happening in the brain and body is our brain and body are so smart and our body's trying to always keep us safe. So if you all know, like when you get really anxious, we don't get a larger perspective. We can't see what's going on. So what is happening in the brain is this part of the body is getting activated. And I love to use Bruce Perry's neurosequential model of therapeutics. If you've heard it before, maybe you can hear it differently today, but if you haven't, just put your hands on the back of the brain. And this explains what is happening when we're getting anxious. Regulate. Hand on the middle of the brain, relate. Hand on the front of the brain, reason. So regulate, relate, reason. And so if we're dysregulated and running anxious, that means the lower part of the brain is active and this part of the brain is starting to go offline. So my big aha moment was I was doing these upstairs interventions, right? When kids were down in the lower part of the brain. So how important that is to be speaking to the lower part of the brain, which actually is no talking, doing our presencing and becoming regulated. And I'll talk more about that more. But Samantha, if you want to add in,
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Thank you for bringing up Dr. Bruce Perry's work. So he's really known as a trauma specialist in the field here. And I want to share with you a graphic model that I've created as part of Mad to Glad, because this can also be a nice visual to help you understand what's happening. So in terms of what Kathy talked about with downstairs brain and regulate, it's the brain scientists who have coined not just the term, but created the knowledge of what happens in child development and human development, like Dr. Who am I thinking? Daniel Siegel, author of Whole Brain Child. And he splits the brain into two sections. And don't worry, we're not going to talk about the brain too much more here today. But he talks about like the downstairs brain and upstairs brain as a starting point. When we are talking about parents, and because I'm a certified parent coach, I'm like always talking about what can we do to create more peace and influence our children's behaviors. I feel like knowing the downstairs brain is key. So the downstairs brain is responsible for fight, flight, or freeze. So if you all think about it for a moment, what have you heard about fight, flight, or freeze? And I know we've got, type it in the chat box. I know we've got some mental health professionals on the call and some of us who have done our own reparenting work with therapists. So you might have a sense of it, but this helps me gauge what to teach so that it feels really useful. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the downstairs brain is activated when there's panic. Uh-huh. It's a survival state. Doesn't this sound like our kids and ourselves? You got to always throw that in there at times. Fire in the brain. Uh-huh, you got it. Kathy, if you hear a drill, please let me know. That's happening right here.
Good.
It's unconscious. Okay, it's asking, am I safe? Right. So fight, flight, or freeze is the survival response that's really early developing when you're a fetus. And so if the bear was chasing you in the woods, really classic example, the downstairs brain activates to keep you alive. So what happens, if you think about fight mode with our kids, what might that look like? That could look like arguing. That could be violence. That could be aggressive behavior. That could be stirring up drama with siblings or verbal power struggles. When the downstairs brain is activated, the other thing that can happen is flight mode. So we all reside in each of these states at times. And so, flight mode, Kathy, I think of the classic story when you were a school social worker where the kid runs under the table and you're like trying to talk your way through it, like chin up intervention. And then you're like, wait a minute, the kid's hiding under the table. The body is showing me flight. The body is showing me small. And this is like a protective state. So, what can we do in this sort of a state? For you as parents, I'm going to speak to you as well. Like flight mode, what that could look like is I got to get out of here. You walk away. You're trying to disengage and disconnect because of big feelings and overwhelm and that feeling of survival that's coming up. We've got freeze mode, which is something that I trend towards. So as a 15-year-old before 10th grade in high school, personally, I would black out in the morning. So I would wake up, I'd come upstairs, fully functional to make my breakfast. I'd put bread in the toaster, pour a glass of milk, put it on the counter, and oftentimes, more days than not, my ears would start ringing and my sight would go black. And so I would lay down on the floor because I felt really dizzy. And when those sensations passed, like I could still hear my dad in the room right next to me. I was in the kitchen, he was in the living room. I could hear him turning the pages of the newspaper, sipping his coffee. What would happen when I would feel less dizzy and I could see again as I would stand up and I would put peanut butter on my now cold toast, wash it down with a glass of milk, and I'd head to school. Well, I didn't know that this like passing out, this panic that I experienced, these stomach aches that I was having were like freeze and shut down mode. And so later I was diagnosed with a social anxiety disorder that I have since overcome with a lot of support, but that's a good example of downstairs brain as you're thinking about in freeze mode. So as you're thinking about this for your own family situation, you might be considering some of your child's signals. I had a teacher who would talk about not your child's symptoms, but the signals like the withdrawal, the screen addiction, the going into rooms, the feeling paralyzed when it came to social situations and not knowing how to navigate that. Or for yourself. I know there are families on the call who have little children as well. And so it can be really common in early child development, whether your child has some mental health challenges or is neurotypical or neurodiverse. It can be common for little kids to kick and hit and scream and, like have all of these expressive behaviors when they have really big feelings. I forgot why I was saying that. Okay.
Well, I was going to add to that, Samantha, is that one thing to remember is that these mechanisms are there to keep you safe. And my breakthrough really in education, like Samantha was talking about, is what your children or clients are showing you, whether they're moving into that flight, fight, freeze, that is the entry point. When we're learning how to meet the body where it's at, so when we can calm that lower part of the downstairs brain, you're able to move into that emotional connection, whether it's your child or a client, and they can see, feel, and hear that they're being seen to move to the front part of their brain, which is that listening, learning, and making good choices.
Hey, thank you.
That
Yep.
was like a breakthrough moment because I literally was
Mm,
entering into the upstairs brain when people are in the downstairs, including myself.
that's right. Thank you. Thank you for that bridge and connection. And so then to finish the thought is you might find yourself as a parent, if you're experiencing certain behaviors, maybe physical behaviors or something else, that freeze mode might be sitting there not knowing what to do. And in the age of conscious parenting, where everyone's like, be kind, be gentle, acknowledge your kids' feelings, if you have a lot of freeze mode happening, you also might feel powerless in situations where things are coming at you and you feel like you're being attacked or abused. And this could also be your survival brain. So we want to understand this to get a glimpse of what might be happening with us and what also might be happening with our children. And then to bring this full circle to the brain model, the downstairs brain contrasts with the upstairs brain. So, like Kathy was saying, as a social worker in the schools, if she goes in talking and problem solves, right? So, if she goes up next to the boy under the table, what would you say to him under the table if you were trying to persuade him out, Kathy?
It's time to come out. I did acknowledge, I see you're here, but I was constantly pulling out rather than being like that contraction is actually really important and connective. And how
Hmm.
important the floor is in grounding. So I
Right.
was pulling out rather than being with, and also just understanding that the body form was showing me that contraction, that teaching that later how important it is to shut down during the day as a part of way of kind of decreasing that stress so we don't move into that full freeze mode.
So, to do it proactively. Go
I
ahead,
would
Jim.
just add as a parent, this is like one of, I'm sure many can relate with this. I jump directly to logic, right? When dealing with bad, let's say anxiety around sleeping at night, I go through it's locked house, we have a security system, you have a big dog, right? I go right to logic. When reality is my daughter's in that on the bottom side of like she's just in survival mode. She doesn't care about logic. And so, yeah, I think partnering that is so huge from a parent perspective.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. So you're hearing how we show up in these different situations. And so if you're having aha moments like, oh, I never thought about it like this before. I've been just trying to persuade my kid out of it or encourage them, like all of these well-meaning strategies, not to even talk about the flip side of what happens when we're triggered and we might be yelling or grabbing or using sarcasm or saying mean words underneath our breath. We want to know that as adults we are, for the most part, trying to bring children towards upstairs brain skills. We want them to use problem solving skills, and so we default, because our brains are fully developed. Bonus Jeopardy question, type in the chat box, do you know how old we are when our brains are fully developed? That's an interesting check, and go ahead and type something in. All right, I see a few rolling in.
At 20s.
All right, yay. Okay, not always the answer I get when I'm strictly talking to parents on the call. So yeah, like mid. They used to always say like 26 to 28. There was a study that got quoted a lot, and then in recent years they've said up even into your 30s. So it is not what you might logically think sometimes if you have a kid with anxiety, if they're younger, if you're like, hey, they hit double digits. Now they're going to be able to problem solve better. Well, double digits is 10 and pretty far away from mid 20s to 30 years old. So when you get good at learning the skills to help your child navigate their feelings, then you're moving them up the path. That's called the staircase of the brain. If you can calm the downstairs brain, then you can develop connective fibers to move them towards better problem solving over time. And
So
what a
I
relief.
think we should do an intervention.
Great. Do it.
So now that, some of you might have known about the downstairs, upstairs brain or that neurosequential model of therapeutics, which is really good to understand the science. But then what do you do? Well, our whole purpose is to start to increase that circulation and give ourselves a little break. So we move from talking, not talking, to just trying something. So many of you who know me, this is my tool that I start all meetings with because often we dive into meetings without really being present. So go ahead and rub your hands, and a lot of times when we're anxious, you'll see kids or you'll be doing this. This rubbing of the hands is just a great technique. You could even slow it down a little bit and do what's called a havening technique. So I'm always trying to kind of bridge what I'm seeing to a technique and then layer on the science. Then from here, you can place your warm hands either on the frontal cortex in the back of the head. These are called neurovascular holds, or like many athletes do, just giving some pressure to the top of the head. So right now, just giving ourselves a break, and we're just gonna just take a few breaths right here. Eyes can be down or closed. And just take a few more breaths. And then gently release your hands. So you can hear in my voice, something is happening. My voice is starting to become low and
Mm.
slow. So if anxiety is too much, too fast, too soon, what are the strategies to try to slow it down? If I slow down my voice and find my feet, I'm going to be bringing more blood flow and circulation to the frontal cortex. And then you just notice thumbs up, I liked it, sideways or down. We're introducing techniques for us as an adult because our nervous system is that intervention when we're more regulated. And in the frontal cortex, our child is able to tag in. Another one is just have your hand on your heart, and then the finger lightly touches that little dent, that sternal notch. So just see if you like that, or you can move it down. And then the hand comes back on the frontal cortex. And again, we're just noticing if we like this or not, and just take a few breaths. And if you want to make it less inconspicuous and you like your hand on your heart, now my hand is cupping the vagus nerve in the courses we go way into this, but just holding that vagus nerve, or what Samantha's doing is here. These are ways to click on that relaxation response and to get back to the frontal cortex. So we might see people doing this, and I always love to say, oh my gosh, do you want to hear a science fact? You're actually, do you like that? Does that feel comfortable? Yeah, I do it all the time. Well, you're cupping your vagus nerve, which clicks on your relaxation response. That's how smart your brain and body is. And when we can move out of shame about anxiety, because the things that we do, the remembering and, either, over and over, that's your brain just trying to keep you safe and remembering and just working over time. Or that total collapse and shutting down and freezing, that is really smart of your body. And we're going to find ways that we don't move into complete overwhelm, but we get to do what your body is kind of showing you the way out. Give me a thumbs up or a wave if that makes sense to you, personally or professionally. Yeah, so it's one thing we're going to learn the tools and the science to and the body work that helps to move into that connection. And at the end of the day, that's what this is about.
Hmm. Yeah, I always, fun fact, Kathy and I are an accountability group. And so every Wednesday morning when we hop on the call at 8:30, we do some sort of a neurovascular hold or something to like regulate our vagus nerve. And it is so interesting when you realize that the things your body is naturally doing, there's some science behind it. And you might notice your child doing something. You might notice them, I think about kids in the schools, like leaning on their desk, putting their head in their hands. So you can provide positive reinforcement for your kid or for yourself, like in an upset moment, like if you see yourself with your head on your hands, noticing that this is your body trying to regulate. And there, like, I want to talk about why it's important to regulate our own bodies and maybe piggyback with you a little bit, Kathy, which is we talk about mirror neurons as well. So, mirror neurons is something where if you're looking in a mirror, it reflects your image, and mirror neurons in your brain reflect the state another person is in. So oftentimes when a parent contacts me for coaching or an online program, one of the things they'll say to me is, I think I just need better discipline. I think I just need better ways of reasoning with my kid if you can provide some scripts for me so that transitions are easier and we're not always rushing and like things ending up in tears. But really, with mirror neurons, you want to be aware of this because these reflect the state another person is in. So if you join this call, or if you think about somebody walking into the room and they've got like a bad attitude or toxic energy or feeling really ungrounded and spun out, we can relate to these, can't we? What's going to happen is you're going to feel some of that starting to stir up inside you. That's mirror neurons. I really got what this meant when I was working at an autism school in the early 2000s as a speech language pathologist on social skills when an 8-year-old boy melted down at the floor on the floor and he was screaming those things you never want to hear a kid scream at you in public. And I looked down at him and I understood for the first time in my life what my dad, who helped who basically was a primary breadwinner to put food on the table for my family of 7, I understand what he meant when he said my blood is boiling with some of us kids' behavior. Where Charlie was melting down on the ground, I'm like, why am I so angry? I'm kind of a people pleaser. I don't understand this. I'm bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. All you need is love, like all of these thoughts. And then I learned about mirror neurons and I realized, well, his fight mode is stirring up my fight mode. The rage and the not being seen and the discomfort in his body, that dysregulation stirred that up in me. So you want to understand that because, sometimes we can be more, I want to invite you into more compassion for yourself. That when your child is having big feelings, sometimes our desire, like Jason was saying, like, I want to solve things and like tell you how you are safe. Sometimes that's, of course, that we want to help our child, but sometimes we're also protecting ourselves from these uncomfortable feelings we're having. So the place that we start when you're a parent or a caregiver is we want to start with what is our body doing when our kids are having big emotions? Because if we want to teach them what to do to come back into regulation, their mirror neurons are paying attention to what mom, dad, caregiver, what is your body doing when you're having big emotions? So, Kathy, I know you talk about our own nervous systems, and we were texting this morning even about how I said, yeah, what I stand for is sometimes we feel like we want to control a situation. We want our kids to feel better, we want ourselves to feel better. But mirror neurons kind of confirm for us we can't control children, but we can influence them.
Yeah. And that's the whole part of being well is finding your set of tools. And I know a lot of us know a lot of tools.
Mm.
It's like, but in the moment, who feels like as a parent, if you're a parent or working with parents, that you have totally blown it? I mean, just completely. And I want to say the good news as a parent is that you get to repair because our children need to know that we can blow it. And then you're repairing when you learn about the brain. It's like, oh my gosh, I was in the downstairs brain. I'm so sorry. But when you start to learn these tools for yourselves, and that's what kind of we're talking about is taking the science and learning these simple tools so then you have a way to get to the upstairs brain quicker than your kids or your clients. So how are you doing that to be regulated in order to help that other person regulate with you? Like that your nervous system gets to be that intervention. So that tight jaw of yours, like even our own children, they're reading that tight jaw is safe. So how do we release the jaw, the eyes, the shoulders? So those are the practical tools we try to get at so we can be able to be in relationship and be that regulatory tool. And so that those mirror neurons work not only for our kids, but that we get to be well in the process of supporting them.
So if we think about applying this, let's be reflective for a moment here. Think about a moment that is a trigger for you where you could react better, calmer, more regulated.
Yeah.
What's uh, what's that moment? I'm curious, just in the chat box. For me, it would be bedtime routine transition. What would be the moment where you feel like if you were more regulated in that moment, things maybe you don't know yet that things could be smoother because it takes more than one tool. We can't just be calm. Uh, I always teach, like the course that's coming up is I teach you 6 skills because most families need a combination of 3 to 5 skills in order to have like the complete package. But so sometimes it's that the situation might improve, or other times it might just be that your self-talk improves. You feel better about how you're showing up and you don't have that guilt that I was personally talking about at the beginning of the call here. Bedtime, potty training, screen transitions. When I see repeats, I'll just pass over it because we get a lot of votes for bedtimes usually. Transitions like getting out the door in the morning. Yeah, longer car rides. Uh-huh. I'm looking at your quote, Jason. I'll pull this car over so fast. Ah, I know the language we use. Thank you for your honesty. I got you there. All right, homework time. Yeah, so you're not alone when you're reading this. I'm sure you can relate. Like these are kind of the top 10. These are the times of days or moments where we become dysregulated and we lose it with our kids. And what I call that when the downstairs brain is overactive is I call it fire in the brain. And fire in the brain is a simple way of taking some of this nervous system language and brain science to understand. Well, let me give you a little background that when the downstairs brain is activated, adrenaline and cortisol flood. And that's why you can't actually, nobody can get to problem solving skills, right? You might have quiet time in the morning and think about how you're going to behave differently next time. And I'm just talking about you, I'm not even talking about your kid, right? You might be thinking about how you're going to behave or act rather than react the next time, but it can be really hard to get to in the moment. And so if adrenaline and cortisol is flooding, then it's because you don't have access to problem solving skills in that moment, just like your kid doesn't have access to those skills. So if you realize that that's like a fire in the brain moment for you, you don't have to plug in your list of 10 things of how do I de-escalate the situation. You could just consider, well, I need to calm the fire. And so for you, how do you calm your fire? Kathy, I love your phrase, be where your feet are, to bring your energy to your feet rather than like all this escalation that's happening. I personally teach the mantra, calm body, calm voice, calm face. And I love the families. I work with so many conscious families where we're good at knowing what to do, but we're not always good at doing it in the moment. And so if you remember, like catch your body. Are your fists clenched at your side? Or like Kathy was saying, is your face like screwed up tightly? Is your voice calm? Again, Kathy, I heard your voice shift as you were doing the neurovascular hold. Calm body, calm voice, and calm face. And if you are wondering, like, does that matter? My kid's 14 or 30 or 50. Maybe you're thinking about like a significant relation partner in your life. Like, does that matter? I always recall back to when my child was still in diapers, and my husband is very kind. He's a pediatric chiropractor, really gentle and loving, and contributes to the household a lot. And he would be changing Mason's diaper, and Mason, who was previously like giggly and happy, I'd walk past the room and look at him, and Mason would be whimpering like he's gonna cry. And I'm like, Ty, honey, you are this far away from our baby right now. Check your face. Because he'd have like that line between his eyebrows, figuring out like how exactly to put the diaper on. And like, this is not an analytical moment. This is like, yeah, your body and voice are calm, but tell your face too.
I see that Monica asked any suggestions when your overwhelming needs you to leave the room and go into another room or go away. And one of the things I'm just going to say that we talk about teaching, I just want to say as we start teaching more, you'll hear more about this. But when you enter where your body is, so if your jaw is clenched, like clenching the jaw and then sticking out the tongue, let's just try this right now. It's ridiculous, but you just go and you stick out your tongue and do what's called a lion's breath. And then sometimes actually people are laughing at that moment because it's so ridiculous. But the shaking, the wanting to leave, sometimes Monica, the wanting to leave, if it's a safety reason and I have to be in the room, I might do some type of tapping, just letting my body release the energy, but also know that I can be in this moment, but create a little more movement. And sometimes if we can leave the room, that is a strategy. And then we do talk about when I get overwhelmed, if you are a parent, I need to have a little space. Like in some of the parenting work that we've done, we have signals like when mommy or daddy or auntie has their hands on here, this is the signal that I need a break and I need people to stop talking. Remember, I'm in the downstairs brain. And then the kid might have a signal for themselves. And then I might have the child use my signal when they need to help me calm down. So let's say my child knows that this is my signal to calm down. I need this. And then the child might do this to help me. Like, so we're not just giving our children or our client strategies or our students, especially in the classroom, like they're helping us too. So Monica, I'm not sure if in that situation, if I answered your question, if sometimes leaving the room is like a great strategy, if people know, like I'm not abandoning you, I just need a moment to get to the
Mhm.
upstairs part of the brain.
Yeah, yeah. And what we've touched on so far, I'll do a little recap here, is we're talking about what's happening in the brain when there's anxiety, big feelings, big behaviors, whether we're talking about kids or ourselves. And so it's having a framework to really realize that there's fire in the brain. And then as another starting point for parents, I like to talk about what works for you so that you don't add fuel to the fire. And so, Kathy, I think what you just offered are some practical suggestions. So, everybody, when I had you um, type in the chat box the things like the transition moments throughout the day where you might want to parent differently or less reactively, a starting point really can be don't add fuel to the fire. So, in the parenting world, there's a lot of strong opinions and binaries, right? Like, we'll never walk away from your kid. Nope, they can never go in a room alone. Oh, you always have to do X, Y, Z. Oh, make sure that you don't overpraise them because otherwise they're not going to develop internal motivation. And so you're just hearing me on a soapbox here to say that there are not absolutes. So there are moments where walking away is the right thing to do. And based on your circumstances, there are moments where, if you have a kid with severe sensory issues or challenges and harmful self behavior, that's a moment where walking away isn't going to help it's not going to improve the situation. So the concepts that you're learning here is just really understand that there's fire in the brain, there's downstairs brain activation. Like that's just the truth when there's anxiety and panic behavior, since that's the topic of today's call, for yourself or your kid. So paying attention to what your triggers are, what your fire looks like, and not adding fuel to the fire. So I feel like there was one more thing that we wanted to talk about. We've got about 15 minutes left here. Um, let's talk about why language like calm down doesn't work. Do you have an initial response to that, Kathy?
I do. Well, first of all, it's I think I'll explain, I'll talk about when we worked in the schools. Like a lot of us want everything to be calm, but for a lot of kids that run anxious or have had a lot of distress or trauma, calm is not safe. So you're asking me to give up my alertness, my hypervigilance, my worry, like Jason, you're talking about with your daughter over and over and over. You're asking me to give that up? That feels so unsafe. So when we say calm down or just breathe slowly, that is not a safety mechanism because what's keeping me safe and the reason I'm here right now is all these other things, but it's overactive. My big thing is to always have kids learn about the brain so they move out of shame. Like your brain is working so hard to keep you safe. And that's a great thing, but we can learn how to work with your brain. So I don't like to use the word calm down or be still. Like for someone like me that has ADHD, everybody wanted me still. The fact that I could stay in the classroom was because I was bouncing my legs so much. Well, now I know like I could tap right now, and there are acupressure points that allow me to stay attentive, but also help release anxiety. So when you say calm down, that feels so And I've done this a ton as a parent and as a social worker. So I want everybody to realize like we've said these words, but to me that feels that that's not honoring my system. Now, we do want a more regulated state. We do want a more easeful state because that makes us feel more in control and have more agency. So we talk to kids a lot about how we stay in our own power by using our mind-body connection.
Yeah, really good. Thank you. And to give you everybody a visual on this, with the screen share, when kids are having big feelings, if we bring it back to brain science, you want to understand that there's a right side of the brain and the left side, and each hemisphere is categorized as having certain types of functions. So the right side of the brain is classified as being responsible for emotions, and the left side for logic and language. So when we think about kids with big feelings and anxiety, panics, fire in the brain, where they're stuck is they're stuck in the right brain. And so if you can begin catching yourself and noticing, I'm in the left brain, I'm using logic and language. And sometimes the logic is, the teaching moment. You can't hit because you have to have safe hands, or you push somebody on the playground and you're 13 years old and here's what's going to happen. And we like paint this whole picture of the fear-based path, and then we, start threatening what's going to happen if they keep acting that way. What we miss is we miss connecting with the child. We miss connecting with them where they're at in their right brain. And so, one of my favorite questions to offer as an inquiry for you as a grown up is, what is my child feeling? So, when we think about, Jason, you and I had talked about this briefly on one of our calls, and I'm just picturing a moment when maybe Georgia's having big feelings. And if you were to answer the question, like, all right, well, how would you say she's feeling? Do you have an initial impression on how you used to answer that question versus today?
Yeah, I would say that I generally was just in that reactive, like her feelings are making me feel this way, and I jumped to reframing. I wouldn't sit in that moment of really getting in with her feelings. I would just move to the reframing moment because that's, as a parent, it's like I'm solution driven. It's like, all right, we got to move you from here to here, and that's my main job. So I've learned I'm not good in practice of this yet. I'm still working. I'm just getting into how are you feeling, Georgia? Express that because that's ultimately what she wants needs most at that point. So yeah, that's been I'm still working at it, to be honest. It's
Hmm.
hard for me naturally to not move to logic.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And there's really like a handful of obstacles that come up classically when parents learn this concept of connecting to kids emotionally. So I'm not going to talk about them all right now, but I do want to share that when you get really good at this skill, it's a game changer. So when you learn how to connect to your child in their emotions, it connects them to you. So the brain science and attachment, if you're looking for a secure attachment, if you've ever heard about attachment theory and insecure versus secure versus avoidant, when you learn how to meet your child where they're at, whether we're talking about the downstairs fight, flight, freeze state that their body is showing us, or the emotional state that it looks like they're being manipulative or defiant or trying to get out of something, that's not really meeting them where they're at emotionally, and what they're really needing to process. So,
Samantha, can I
oh
just
yeah.
interrupt? I think Heidi brought up a good point, and some I also have struggled with is what suggestions would you and Kathy give in a two-home scenario where that child's going back and forth and maybe getting different responses to their emotions, and one parent might be handling it better or the other. Any thoughts on that sort of scenario? I know that happens with a lot of kind of families and in those dynamics.
Do you want to lead, Kathy?
Well, I You know, that is very challenging. Um, I think one thing to do is, I mean, we try to work on understanding, have the child work on understanding their nervous system as well as the adult. Because here's the deal, like as a child, it depends how old the child is, Heidi, but when I'm working with a little bit older children, we talk about how in different homes our bodies are going to be responding and people are going to respond in different ways, and how do we regulate our own nervous system. I mean, that is so important because you can't control really what's going on there. What you have control of is your own relationship with that child and that communication with that child. But I think in general, when kids are going to two different places, there are going to be two different scenarios in a lot of situations. So, how do we learn how to respond to that? And I actually go through the body, like, what is my nervous system doing, and how am I able to respond? And you responding in that way to the co-partner.
Yeah, and I think it's also important because we see some diagnoses in the chat box about a co-parent who has or a parent of the child who has PTSD and TBI, and so I can make guesses about what that might look like behaviorally, um, Heidi. And so I think I also want to just share something that's reality, which is it's true that kids are like ducklings and they like imprint on the person around them. So if you've ever had a child who responded really well to a certain teacher and you're like, yeah, that teacher knew my kid and they knew how to relate and they had their number and they really thrived. And then there might be another teacher who I think about my fourth grade teacher who was really skillful at providing structure. But my mom loves to tell the story about, like, I just didn't know what to do. You cried for the first 7 months of the school year in fourth grade because I was really sensitive and tender, and that structure and that firmness was created a lot of pressure for me, who already had a brain that was trending towards anxiety and freeze mode. So I don't say that to be discouraging at all, but to know that in families where a child may be moving between more than one household, you already know like there's a certain transition period where things are kind of wonky. And for some families, they're like, that's 2 days or that's 3 days, and then it's time to turn around and go back again. So I'm offering you the encouragement and invitation that what you do is always going to matter. So don't give up. You knowing how to regulate your body, you knowing how to relate to your kids' emotional state is a skill that starts forming a pattern. Like the more times they're exposed to that over the years and the decades, the better they become at communicating their own feelings. And there's this point where we are hands off and we can't control it, but you can control how you're responding. And in the field of psychology, at the tender age of 19, I remember learning at the University of Minnesota, there's a concept called one caring adult.
Mhm.
You all know what one caring adult means? They said no matter circumstances, if there is one caring adult in someone's life, like that is the factor that could lead them to successful outcomes. So knowing that you're a caring adult and there are things that are out of your control at the same time, like we hold that duality.
And I was just going to answer, and we can, in our course, we do this much longer. And this is gets exciting to hear everybody's questions because this really is a sample of what it's going to mean to be in a small group and to ask these questions and feel that support. But Chris asked when an adolescent's on fire in the fight mode before test taking, and we know test taking is a very high stakes for a lot of kids. And Chris, the answer is, these preventative techniques, teaching these preventatively is so, so important because we can't learn a new skill when we're on fire. So if that adolescent is an adolescent that moves into that fight mode by, asking questions and arguing, maybe at that moment you won't have a chance, but preventatively in the future, just talking about in general, this is why we bring this to whole schools, is like, how are we teaching regulation, what happens in your brain before test taking, and how we move to the back of the brain. So I would also just encourage any proctors into that specific classroom or parent, when you are dealing with that dysregulation, in that moment, you are the regulatory tool, dropping attention to your feet, getting the body, the shoulders back, ways to use your body to convey safety. And just slow, the name of the game is just slow things down without being irritating. Because if you're like, all right, we just need to slow, kids are going to get upset. But just in your own body, like really slow it down, low and slow.
So
And
good.
giving
Thank
that power, choice, and voice. These are concepts. When we feel like we're anxious, we have no power, no voice, no choice, you know, too much, too fast, too soon. So interventions, low and slow, power, voice, and choice. And again, this we go deeper into this later.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Kathy. So I'm type A enough that I like to be on time, and we dedicated 60 minutes for this webinar. So we're going to talk about a little bit more in the last 5 minutes. And if you have some questions that you want to stay on for, like I've blocked my calendar, so we can stick around for an extra 10 or 15 minutes if we need to answer your questions. But I want to share and invite Jason to share a little bit. What we wanted to do was give you a taste of what we care about when it comes to children's mental health and behavioral health. And this webinar is sponsored by Jason and I today as founders of a new parenting platform called Togetherly. And I'm wondering, Jason, if you could talk a little bit about what Togetherly is all about.
Yeah. Uh, well, first of all, I feel like this is a great kind of microcosm of great content. This is obviously a big group, but think about this with a group of 10 like parents going through a 6 week journey. So live facilitated by people like Samantha and Kathy. Great content, like what you got some of today. And then 24/7 kind of community to engage, to have partnership on the journey. And really what Togetherly is trying to do is fill the gap between me being alone searching and on Reddit groups and Google and just trying to navigate myself to the high cost of a personal one-on-one coach or consultant to really help me as a parent, where I'm paying 150 to 250 an hour to just like get some specific help. Togetherly's trying to fill that full gap, which is let's learn, let's do it together and feel not alone, and let's have experts giving us a little bit better personalized advice as we go through that journey. And that's what we feel like is just has been a gap. There's just not a lot of services, a lot of fragments out there, but not a lot of services that can do that. And finally, the second piece I want to say is that science is finally catching up with what we're all feeling as parents. In serving in the behavioral tech space, payers and providers are starting to see, and research is showing that parent stress index is something they're measuring a lot of, and parent self-efficacy, PSI and PSE, are two things that they are now proving dramatically affects the outcomes of the child. And so, something we've all been feeling and knowing is that parents need more help. It's actually showing up in the science and in the data that it's dramatically affecting the kids if we are not equipped. And so, that's the mission of Togetherly, and we want to invite you into joining our community and courses.
Yeah. And so this webinar is also to share with you that we have a new course that's starting. It's actually the first course being offered on the platform. And we have other expert content creators lined up so that after this course is complete, people like Kathy will be running a course. We have somebody in mind to talk about screen time plans. And we wanted to be like the third path. We didn't want we all know what it's like to navigate a parenting course that's very DIY. We know what it's like to invest highly in specialists and practitioners. So we want this to be the third path where you're getting really expert support at a price point that's affordable. So officially, as of today, you are the first ones to hear that I am teaching a new course that's called Parenting Kids with Anxiety. And this 6 week course is designed to give you more than the tools we talked about here today. We've just did a website share real quickly if you're interested. The cohorts will only have 10 to 15 people in it. And the cool thing about it is it's scheduled in a way where there's no pre-work. You literally show up for your 1 hour time slot, you get some expert content and then group facilitation, and you begin making, we hope, I mean, I will say this as a relationship person, like friends in the community. The name Togetherly indicates that we don't want you to feel like you're doing this alone. When you hear other people's stories, it can help take away some of the guilt that you have on the journey. It can help you feel really supported. So it's tools, it's expert facilitation, then of course it's meeting in small groups. So if you are interested in joining that, we kick off in 2 weeks, but enrollment is only 1 week. So you've got a week to sign up for it. And because you sign up for this first webinar that we're offering, check your email because there's a $50 coupon code in there. If you have questions about this, go ahead and type it in the chat box right now. You're probably, we're not like hiding anything. I always have to remember to say the course is $300 and you get a $50 off coupon code to make it 250. So we would love to have you in this course. And then, Jason, we're also really curious about what people want for next topics. Isn't that right?
Yes. So, I mean, that's a big thing. I think about this group as this kind of first webinar being almost like a founders group to me of, hey, we're parents just trying to build this brick by brick into this something that is valuable for all of us, and would love your feedback and for you to be a part of it, sharing what sort of topics you'd be interested in. What sort of resources you need as we build Togetherly. It's really trying to be that full content community, resources unique to you along this journey. And so would love for your feedback and to be a part of that. That's really how we're even seeing these first courses is getting feedback as we go, to build a better platform for parents like us.
Thank you so much. Oh, go ahead, Kathy. I see you.
No, I was just gonna, whenever we're gonna end, I want to end because part of mind body practices is we begin and end with something that adds closure and adds, like, there is a rhythm in life. Like we just like the arousal relaxation, we go up and we go down. And so just knowing that at any point during the day that you have your mind body connection. So Samantha, if there's anything else you want to say, otherwise I want to end with a little mindfulness practice.
Yeah, I'll share one more thing. I think about what parents often say they're surprised by. So I've been leading parenting curriculum for 14 years, even though I've been working with families that have intense kids for 21 years. And I just want to encourage you, if you've tried a lot of things and you've been awake at 2 a.m. Googling and you've talked to a lot of practitioners, but you still find yourself in this situation where you're frustrated and you don't feel heard and you feel like you don't have the tools, even though you're trying really hard. I want you to know that that's really common for people who are in my courses. And so if that's you, you would be in the right space to join to get a plan. And parents are often surprised at how things can change and sometimes quite quickly. So for those of you who are like, yeah, but I have a kid in the age range of 7 to 14, can it change as quickly as when they were little and I had, really consistent support? And the answer is yes. They're 6-week courses because when you have practical tools that you're guided through step by step and you actually make changes, you see some improvements within the first couple of weeks. So at the end of the day, one of the reasons that I love the course this summer is because I stand for parents finding contentment, like enjoying the role that you're in. And sometimes that doesn't mean you can cure a diagnosis, but when you can shift how you show up and you see your child shifting too, you start seeing more of those glimmers of happiness and feeling it within yourself, and you feel proud of how you're showing up. So at the end of the day, we're really shifting those feelings of guilt and shame. And instead of somebody saying to you, like, you're doing your best, you're doing a great job, like, I want you to feel that way too.
And this isn't, obviously it's for parents, but it's for those supporting parents too. So those in schools and therapists. So just know that these courses are really to support people, whether you're a parent or supporting other parents. And I do like that feedback and, doing a course specifically for educators, absolutely. And to let you know, Becky, that we do a lot of this is really practical in each course to get for yourself too, and then how to support others. So in the mind body world, we do what's called, you can do body interventions, which we did these three neurovascular holds today.
Mhm.
But we can also do a mindfulness practice just by looking at an image. And I pulled this card today. I don't know if you can see that. These are these inner resource cards. Let me see if I can get it closer to the camera. And inner resources are parts of you that can support you. And this is inner resource. It's a raccoon, resourceful. And so just take a moment to find your feet, just kind of wiggle your toes and just take a breath as you look at that cute little image. And here's how we can be with resourceful today. There is a way and I'm the way. Resourceful wants me to remember I know enough, I have enough, and I'm more than enough. It can be easy or easier than you think. So the wish for you today is may you find your way with ease and may you connect with the people who will support you and may you find exactly who and what you need exactly when you need it. So if this is speaking to you, we would love for you to be a part of this community because as Jason and Samantha and I know, like we can't do this alone. And it really can be easier than we think when we get into community. So we so appreciate all your time. We will stay on if you have any other personal questions. Otherwise, you can check that link in the box, and we hope to hear from you soon. Thanks,
Thank you so
Monica, for
much,
having
everybody.
a child on here. Thanks, Amanda.
Uh-huh. And if you have a question, go ahead and type it in the chat box. Otherwise, we're watching and waving you goodbye. Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. It's always a good sign if you want to stick around longer than a webinar. It means you're in a good space, doesn't it? All right. If you feel like you have a question, but it's too hard to type in the chat box, you're welcome to unmute. Just unmute and ask your question or raise your little hand icon. Yeah, it's always so good. Oh, Ginny, nice to see you. It's always so good to hear, no matter how many times we hear it. Nice. All right. Jason and Kathy, any parting FAQs you feel like we need to answer to get on the recording before we say adieu?
I don't think so. I think this was great. It was great to hear and get some engagement in the chat from all the parents going through it, right? I already feel encouraged. Thank you guys for teaching us a lot of those things. I'm going to be using those this week with my daughter, and can't wait to learn more. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jason.
We did get one question. My 13-year-old is constantly telling us to stop yelling, even when we feel we are talking calmly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I relate with this one.
What's your initial answer, Kathy? I'm so used to hearing
You
myself
go,
give answers. I like hearing yours.
you go ahead, actually, on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I really get into two things that we already covered today, and rather than layering in new tools, because I could go that direction too, I'm going to reinforce what we talked about today. So it can be helpful to pay attention to your body, voice, and face. So you might be talking calmly, but um, you might be tense. You might be at well, your child's 13, so who knows? They could have like surpassed you in height already. But sometimes like the nonverbal cues of this can be really feel prickly and edgy to kids. So I would pay attention to calm body, calm voice, and calm face. I would also pay attention to, are you trying to teach them a lesson in the moment? Because that's going to like be the shutdown if they're having big feelings about something. The protection that might come out verbally is stop yelling at me, but you might be like, I'm not yelling, I'm just trying to tell you why this is really important. And so it triggers more of that survival mode. Can you relate?
I
I
was
feel
just
so
gonna say,
vulnerable right now. I feel like it's both like I think what my daughter's saying when she's saying you're yelling because I get so frustrated because I'm not yelling. I'm like this isn't yelling. What she's seeing is the lines in my face, right? Her yelling is just everything else outside of just tone. And that really relates of something that I struggle with.
Yeah.
and just so you know, physiologically, the eyes and ears take in information differently, literally take in different information differently when we're moving from the back front of the brain to the back of the brain. So as you're moving into that more flight or fight mode, your body is taking information in differently. And so while you might feel like you're not, they are perceiving. And so at the end of the day, whatever that perception is, that's what we want to deal with. Because then we're getting into it, like Jason said, then we've all been there. We have all been there. Is moving into that kind of now we're tagged into um, that other struggle, which isn't what
Mhm.
this is about. It's about being seen, heard, and understood.
Yeah, to calm the fire and create connection. Yeah,
There's
exactly.
another question that I can definitely relate with as well. For my daughter, it's about storm. She went through a really bad storm once, and now anytime there's rain, she's constantly wanting to check the weather app and know is there going to be rain tonight or lightning. Rebecca's talking about 8-year-old with an incident with a dog, and so this is like kind of very specific anxiety around kind of a moment in their life. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
Yeah, I feel like this is more like somatic and trauma healing, and Kathy is more of an expert on that part than me. Do you want to talk about the
Well,
body,
Rebecca, this
Kathy?
is where, I mean, I feel like kind of I'm talking about a lot of the same things, but I would even just working with your 8-year-old about what happens in the body when they are thinking or being around a dog. I mean, and so knowing that physiology, and then whether if that's directly too much for that 8-year-old, your 8-year-old to talk about, Rebecca, is like even thinking about that makes them, you can talk about just other ways that our body deals with this. So we have an app. It's called Move Mindfully, and it's $4.99, and it has all these mind body strategies used when anxious, high energy, low energy. So what we want to do is really teach children and ourselves like how to meet our bodies where we're at. Like if we move into shutdown, how can we move into shutdown and understand the science about that? So I think teaching the skills, and it's so empowering, Rebecca, because at the end of the day, you know, I bet your child would feel really great if they can learn how that incident was super traumatic and how to be in better relationship with pets and all and other things in their lives. So working on just understanding the body and how to use your mind body connection.
Hmm.
Yeah,
And
that trauma
speaking,
healing can
oh,
be so hard. I know for Georgia, right, where I fall into as a parent is she wants the blinds closed so she can't see it. She wants to be distracted. I try to go to these tools that actually end up putting her in more of a box. And I don't know if Rebecca, as far as like just stay away from dogs, or we won't go over to kids' houses that have dogs, or right, you start just going in protect mode. And that isn't always, really helping them at the end of the day. The-
hmm.
Because then
And
they
there,
know how powerful that they can do it on their own. Yeah.
yeah, and
yeah.
and there are also like verbal practices. So Kathy, you spoke more to mind-body practices. And verbal practices, if you've ever read the book The Whole Brain Child by Dr. Daniel Siegel, who's the leading neuroscientist, I would say I like his strategy called name it to tame it. And they share an example of a family that gets in a car accident and the child was a toddler, and every time they heard sirens, because sirens, emergency vehicles came to the scene, then it was really like sirens were really traumatic. And so, what trauma healing therapists often will do is they'll do something where let's name and retell the story, and then you play with pause, rewind, fast forward. And not that you want to put the body back in that state of stress, but just to share with you whenever we're looking at how to work with a situation. You want to understand where is the special list coming from, and then putting some of these pieces together. So with the dog, I was talking to you about the strategy of labeling feelings. Things like, I can see that's really scary. And maybe if the child chooses to, it's called dosing, they might choose to retell the story themselves of the dog that bit them. We're not trying to draw it out of them. And I'm kind of at risk of getting into the therapy zone here. And I don't want to go too deep into it, but knowing that if your child wants to talk about it, not closing it down, that was really upsetting. And then how many, you might notice, or myself, even if I'm talking about something that was really stressful with my aging parents and the situation happened, and my dad, who doesn't have prefrontal cognitive control, did something really explosive, I might need to talk about it a few times because I'm trying to self soothe. So there's like this combination of, if I have a really good listener with me, like that was really overwhelming. That's really a lot for you to navigate. Like if you're labeling the emotions where someone's at so they can keep processing, and then you do some mind body trauma release, like the things Kathy's good at, you know.
That brings up a little bit of potentially a course or topic specifically around that. I feel like that is a big enough like specialty around kind of trauma specific anxiety as just something I was thinking about. I think those are all good points and a good question.
Right. Great. All right. Well, you are welcome, Rebecca. Thank you for your activity. And Chris, nice to see you again. I've seen you before. Thanks for keeping your video on. Friends, thanks for sticking around. I'm making guesses. You might be walking, or your hands are busy or wet because you're washing dishes, if you're like me, and so you're still listening. We appreciate you being here. And we look forward to seeing more of you. And check your emails, because tomorrow we will send out this replay and include the link in case you wanted to sign up and get in one of our small groups. Take good care.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. You're welcome. You're welcome.